Hi everyone and welcome back to Bold and Tactical with me, Jessica Dicksson. Normally I used to remind you about that my guest is not speaking on behalf of the employer he's currently working for, but from his own experiences and thoughts. But that is not really the case today, because today our guest is running his own educational and consulting business. And today we are going to talk about how we can reduce our inventory levels and costs and optimize profit within our supply chains. And our guest is one of my lecturers from when I was studying in purchasing and supply management, and he was then and still is a very appreciated teacher. He has a genuine interest in logistic and inventory management and a long experience within teaching and consulting. Today he's working as a lecturer at the Linnaeus University, meanwhile he's also running his own educational and consulting business, Nordic Supply Chain Advice. A warm welcome to today's guest, Roger Stokkedal.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So Roger, you're running your own educational and consulting business, Nordic Supply Chain Advice. What can you tell us about it?
Well, our goal is to provide companies with competence within supply chain management. We like to think that we create supply chain excellence. For example, we have courses in inventory management, negotiations, and Excel for purchasers.
So are the courses held in specific locations or are you going out to the customers?
Most of our courses are open courses where individuals can participate. Most of the participants come from different companies. But then maybe 20% of what we are doing are tailor-made courses for bigger groups from certain companies, and then we come out to the company. Okay. Wherever they want, all over Sweden.
And how many teachers are working with you?
Besides me, we have 4 teachers for different competences within law, negotiations, rhetorics.
Which courses are you teaching in?
I'm teaching the inventory courses and the Excel courses for purchasers.
So Roger, I also know that you've been working as a journalist early on in your career. And you wrote an article within today's subject for the paper Logistic and Leaders in Norway. What I'm curious about is how you got into journalism in the first place.
I started as a journalist directly after my studies in business and administration. And that was because my first wish was to become a journalist. But then I changed and started to study economics and business. So that was to fulfill my dream as a younger man to become a journalist. So then I could do both because my first job, as you said, was in a paper writing about inventory management and logistics.
Today we're going to talk about how we can reduce our inventory levels and cost and optimize profit within our supply chains. And the first thing I would like to clarify is why do we keep inventories? So Roger, why do we keep inventories?
The reason why we need inventories is that inventories help us to provide high service levels to our customers. This means having the goods available and deliver with as short lead time as possible. And to do that, we normally need to have inventories on hand. But to keep inventories costs a lot of money. Generally, we assume that the annual inventory costs are somewhere between 15 and 30% of the inventory value. This means that an inventory value of 10 million costs us 1.5 to 3 million annually. And that is one of the reasons why companies want to reduce their inventory levels. Another reason is that reduced inventories lead to less capital employed and thereby better cash flow and better return on investments.
Yeah, and most of the companies out there are aware of this, but why do you think there's so many companies that isn't reaching their full potential?
Many companies are having the same reduction for all their inventory, and that is what we in Swedish call the cheese slicing method. This means that we cut everything evenly, and that means that some of the items or the stock keeping units, if you want, will have too big reductions, and others will have too little reductions. The trick is to differentiate so that you reduce more on some items and less on others.
Since I took your class and I also refreshed my knowledge by reading your articles, I do know that there is in general 3 different methods to decrease the stock levels and still keep a high service level to our customers. The first one would be differentiating the service levels. The second one is move low frequent articles backwards in the supply chain. And the third one is reduce the number of article numbers. But it's always quite easy to read the theory, but it's so much harder to do it in practice. So how do we transfer the theory into practice?
I will start with differentiating the service levels, because that is the foundation for all the 3 methods. The starting point to reduce inventories is to have in mind that different articles have different demand frequencies. That means that some articles are sold more often and others more seldom. Normally, we assume that 80% of the sales order lines are from 20% of the articles. This phenomenon is known as the Pareto rule, or more common, the 80-20 rule. This we can use because the 80-20 rule is a statistical phenomenon which we can measure and see that it's very, very accurate. And this rule we can use to differentiate the service levels between different articles. High-frequent articles have less demand variation than the low-frequent ones, and this means that they need less relative safety stock than the low-frequent ones to maintain the same service levels. Therefore, giving the high-frequent articles a higher service level will cost less than the same increase in low-frequent articles.
So are you saying that the high-frequent articles are easier to forecast, so we can have less safety stock, which will reduce our inventory cost per article and increase our cash flow?
Yes, that is a good way to explain it. And to get a good view over this, we can use the ABCXYZ method, which means dividing the articles into categories. And in short, this means that the high-frequent articles are named X, and the articles with high turnover measured in money are called A. In the other end of the scales, low-frequent articles are named Z, and articles with low turnover are called C. Today we will only focus on frequency, so we talk about X, Y, and Z articles, which means high, medium, and low-frequent articles. And we can say that the rule of thumb is that the 20% of articles that are standing for 80% of the sales order lines are the X articles. The next 30% of the articles are standing for 15% of the sales order lines, and the last 50% of the articles are standing for 5% of the order lines. So if we, for example, want a total average service level of 95%, measured as percentage of sales order lines delivered on time, we can give the low-frequent articles a lower service level and the high-frequent ones a higher level. We can explain this with an example. The goal is to achieve an average service level of 95%. We have then given the Z articles 67%, the Y articles 88%, and the X articles 98%. According to the 80-20 rule, the total average service level will still be 95%. This is calculated as, for example, if 20% of the articles are standing for 80% of the order lines, you take 0.8 times 0.98, which is 0.78. This will be done for the Y and Z articles too, and then you simply add the 3 values and you will end up with a total service level at 95%.
And how is the other 2 methods related to this?
Yes, I mentioned the 2 methods: move low-frequent articles backwards in the supply chain and reduce number of article numbers. What these 2 methods have in common is that they are based on the same rule of thumb. What happens is that if a low-frequent article is stored at many locations, the demand frequency at each location will be relatively lower than if everything was stored at the same place. A rule of thumb says that the inventory increases with the square root of a number of locations. If we, for example, go from 1 location to 4 locations, the inventory necessary to give the same service level will be doubled. The same goes for number of article numbers. The rule of thumb says that the inventory increases with the square root of number of article numbers. If we, for example, go from 1,000 article numbers to 4,000 articles, the inventory necessary to give the same service level will be doubled.
So where do you suggest that we draw the line between the high-frequent articles and the low-frequent articles?
I suggest that you arrange the articles in descending order based on their number of order lines. You then calculate each article's percentage of the total number of order lines. Then you must accumulate these percentages, and you will then be able to divide the articles in groups by saying that the first 80% are the X articles, the next 15% are the Y articles, and the last 5% are the Z articles.
So Roger, before we end this episode, I have one last question for you. To define your service levels and decide how many articles you want or need in your assortment is quite easy because you have the full control over the decision yourself. But to move low-frequent articles backwards in supply chain involves several suppliers and could be a little bit trickier. So how do you suggest that we manage that?
Yes, that's a tricky question. But inventory management is a part of supply chain management, and everything is about giving the end customer as high service level as possible at the lowest cost possible. Everything else, even the supply chain who manage this in the best way, is the winner. So therefore, it's in every supply chain's interest to optimize costs and service. Therefore, everything is about cooperation in the chain, and the sharing of the cost will be a question of negotiations between the parties.
Okay guys, this was all for today. I hope you found this episode useful, and if you haven't optimized your inventories yet, now is a really good time to start. If you want to hear more from Bold and Tactical, make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel and following our LinkedIn page. And don't forget to take a look at nsca.sc and the courses they offer. If you have any question, you can write them at our LinkedIn page and we will try to answer as many as possible. And Roger, thank you so much for joining us at the show today. It's been really great to have you here. And guys out there, thank you so much for listening. I wish you the best luck with your inventory management, and I'll see you next time. Bye.